In this session, I will show you how to build a Maya shading network that works for Seneferu's texture and shader automation. So the way how you build such shading network like the ones I'm showing or the ones that is shipping with Seneferu is very easy, and I will show you an example. Let's say that you are assigned to work on such shader. What you can do is, let's open the hypershade. Let's say that I'm making this shader here. Then what you can do is to, as I mentioned before, you can tweak all the shaders and test by, of course you can load the dependencies here and you will get some whatever and testing environment. So you can put here any object or any asset you have, then you can start tweaking the shader without textures first and set the parameters that you think that should be like that. For example, you want the specular to be physical, whatever the parameters you want to set, and you want the default color to be, for example, like dark red, and you want the specular to be not this one. Let's say the primary, you want it to default to this value. Then when you set these defaults, you can select the shader and go to the shading component that you are expecting to have textures, like for example the diffuse color, like the specular face. And when you click on this button, this will automatically create textures and will attach them to the shader, to the shading components that you selected. So you will notice that these two texture nodes are created, and you will notice that the missing color is using the default color that you want. In that case, when this shader is resolved in render time, if there were no texture published for the diffuse color, then the default value, which is the red, is going to be used instead. If there is a texture, then the texture will be used. In render time, the renderer will know the difference or how many tiles based on the parameters that you have set here for the tiling count. And if you don't think that the shader will require, or this texture will require tiling, then you can use instead, for example, let's say that we want to assign something for the normal map. Let's say the bump. And let's say that you want to have this without manifold or texture placement nodes. So this will be created like this. And so this is how it works. If you want to delete one of these nodes, you don't just select the node and delete it, because if you deleted the node, for example this, notice that the default color will go to the default of the shader, which is not what you want. Instead, select the shading component and click on this button, which will revert back the color to the default tweaked value that you made before, so you don't lose it. Then, of course, once you are done with the shader, you will select the shading network and you will select the shading network, and of course you have to name your shader depending on the shader assigned to you. In this case, it will be generic, just like that. Actually, this is something that you have to do from the first moment, because it will be involved in the name of any texture you are creating. It was actually my mistake that I didn't mention that from the beginning, but this is what you have to do. You have to name the shader properly before start working on it. It doesn't harm anyway, the shader will go properly, but it's good to have your names clean. And by the way, if you want to, if this shader will have displacement, you can also select the shading group and click on the disp button. This will create a displacement shading network that works the same way by resolving the things. Finally, when you have your final shading networks where all the textures you are expecting is exposed and having texture nodes, then what you can do now is to just select the shading group node and click on the publish button. This will write out this, will publish it to the system, and by default, if you didn't change the default settings that Seneferu comes with, this will write the Maya version of the shader and will also translate this shading network to Katana Python script that you can use it later in Katana to create the same shading network in Katana, which is something actually Seneferu will do automatically. When you load this shader as dependency in Katana, then Seneferu will automatically execute the script and build the shading network.